This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and thank you for tuning into the Golden State Media Concept Sports Podcast, where we talk the latest and greatest news in the world of sports. As always, I'm Alex. Alone today, as every Tuesday is. Ben and Anthony will be back tomorrow, but until then, I have news for you today. I'd like to say I hope you had a happy and fun Halloween, wherever and whatever you might have done. Hope it was nice there for you. I know we got a little rain out here, so hopefully you didn't have too much of that. I know I was bummed as a kid when it rained on Halloween. Today, we are looking at the Monday Night Football game between the Vikings and the Bears. Somewhat of a surprising outcome, one would say. We'll be looking at tonight's Game 6 of the World Series between the Chicago Cubs and the Cleveland Indians. And then I have some notable news from basketball and football in terms of players moving and players retiring as well. But let's go ahead and start with the Monday night football game between the Vikings and the Chicago Bears, the Purple People Eaters versus the Monsters of the Midway, as many called them when their defenses were both very, very good. And then going into this game, and most of this season, the Vikings were looked at as the best defense in the league. Those have thought maybe it was the reimagining of the Purple People Eaters. Well, not so much last night. The Chicago Bears win this one, 20-10 over the visiting Minnesota Vikings to move to 2-6 on the year. The Vikings fall to 5-2, only their second loss, but it's their second straight loss. Sam Bradford threw for 228 yards and a score. Matt Asiata, not an amazing day, 42 yards for him. Leading receiver was Stephon Diggs with 8 receptions, 76 yards, and a score. The real discussion was to be made for the Bears offense. 252 yards and a score from Jay Cutler, 153 yards and a score from Jordan Howard, and their leading receiver was Zach Miller with 88 yards on 7 receptions. What was most impressive to me in this one was the fact that throughout the game, Sam Bradford did not have time much to do anything, and we know that the offensive line is not a very good offensive line. A lot of injuries, and the Bears' defense isn't exactly a pushover defense either. They have good pieces. They have a good rush line. You know, their line was getting to the quarterback all night. This Minnesota team, I think what they found with them is when there's no time for them to do something, obviously many teams in that sense, but when there's no time for them to get their offense moving, and the running game was, like I said, they had 57 yards as a team, was relatively non-existent. Bradford, he's not a quarterback that's going to rush around the pocket and run around and make plays with his feet. He's very much in the pocket, throw the ball, get what you're going to get with your designed play, and that really showed last night, and I think the defense suffered because they were on the field a lot last night. They were on the field the majority of last night, I feel like. And Bradford was sacked 5 times in this game for minus 27 yards. That didn't do them any favors by any means. The offensive line was just not protecting for them, and again, you can't say much about that because of the amount of players that are not there. But what you can say is that the Vikings were 2 for 13 on third down last night. And that is not going to get you the ball back. That's not going to continue drives. That's not going to eventually allow scores to happen. And I think that really showed why Chicago's offense, but why the Vikings defense didn't really perform the way that they normally perform. They were giving roughly 6.6 yards a play. Both had total drives of 10, 61 to 60 plays, but the yard differential there was 403 to 258. I think the real problem was just exhaustion on the Vikings side there. I think the problem was that they couldn't get anything moving on the offensive side of the ball, and they really, really suffered there. Now, Jake Cutler, on the other hand, he looked pretty good coming off of his first game since hurting that thumb of his. Like I said, 20 for 31, 252 and 1. One of those touchdown passes was to his number one receiver, Alshon Jeffrey, who finished with a good day, 4 for 63 and a score. The big thing, though, was Jordan Howard, 153 yards in a score. He added 49 yards receiving on the night. What impressed me about him was this is a Vikings defense that normally doesn't give much on the ground. And again, you can say that the fatigue and all these different things. He was just controlling the game. He did have a long of 69. The majority of his yards did come from that one in a sense. But he still grinded out yards. He averaged 5.9 yards a carry. He looked fantasy-wise in that sense, too, if you're somebody that plays fantasy, very good, because he was a sit in almost every league you can imagine against this vaunted Vikings defense. They've been shutting down runners mostly every game this year, in a sense. So that was very impressive to see in my eyes. Even when the Vikings are playing well, the first 5 games that they won, receivers weren't doing great, but certain tight ends would definitely get open. So I'm not surprised to see Zach Miller as the leading receiver in this one. Again, 7 for 88. Their linebackers are very good in space, but they definitely are a defense that will give you what they want to give you. And a lot of times it'll be the tight end because the teams that they seem to have played, aren't, they're not the premier teams of tight ends, you know what I mean? So we take a look at the Vikings. The Vikings, like I said, other than Greg Olsen, you don't really have any premier tight ends in that. Their last few games, Titans, Packers, Panthers, Giants, and Texans, before losing to the Eagles. The Vikings move on to play the Lions this Sunday, and then the Redskins and the Cardinals. They look to really turn it around against the Lions. The Lions have been, we've seen that they've been susceptible to good defenses, but Matt Stafford is playing lights out this year, playing very well. So, needless to say, we will have to see how that goes for them. Now we move to the Chicago Bears. The Bears, after this game here, they have a bye week, and then they play the Buccaneers, the Giants, the Titans, and the Niners. Definitely some games in which they can get back on track, you know what I mean? They, as it stands now, unfortunately in a tough division that they are in, they are in last place. As it stands, like I said, Minnesota 5-2. They're still holding on to that number 1 spot in the NFC North, followed by Green Bay at 4-3, coming off a loss this weekend to Atlanta. Detroit at 4-4, whom they'll be playing soon. And then, of course, the aforementioned Chicago right there. I think for them to win more games, they're going to have to get a better offensive output. Their defense is not going to win them many games. I think their offense is going to have to at least put up points. You look at their defense and points against, they're middle of the pack, but points for, they are 32nd in the NFL, scoring an average of 16.4. That is something that needs to change if they're going to win more games. This defense is not good enough so far this year to allow me to say that they are going to be able to win games with their offense if their defense plays the way it's been playing. With their defense win them games with the way their offense has been playing. It's just not. I don't see that happening. I don't see that as a likely thing. That it's again. If you go to the Buccaneers, who show that they can. The Raiders don't have a great defense, but they show they can put up points regardless of what their defense does, at least at times. And you play the Bears, who might have a defense that can slow you down a bit, but their offense isn't putting up points, and then maybe you're in this situation where your defense is tired, like the Vikings maybe last night. Then you're in trouble. You go to face the Titans in a couple weeks, and that's a home game for you. But can you slow down that rushing attack of the Titans? So It's going to be something very interesting to see, for me at least, to see if they can withstand this kind of up and down kind of play from both sides of the ball. And it's going to be a big thing for them leading into this offseason as well. They really need to address that offense. They got a guard in the draft this year, but I believe he was already hurt. They were playing with backup guards last night as well. They need to address their offense for sure, because they did get Jordan Howard in the 5th, and he was a diamond in the rough, but Daniel Braverman was their only other offensive player besides that guard to be drafted, and he was a 7th rounder. I'm not sure if he even made the team. So they definitely need to address the offense side of the ball. Alshon Jeffrey's a free agent after this year. It's going to be interesting to see if he stays. I believe Jay Cutler's a free agent as well. There's going to be a lot of turnover, I think, in Chicago after this season. Okay, we're going to take our first break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk some MLB baseball as we head into Game 6 of the World Series as the Cubs try to fight off yet another elimination game. And the Cleveland Indians try to win their first World Series in quite a long time. So we'll take that break. We'll come back here in just a moment at the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Then we are back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, and now we are talking baseball. Game 6 of the World Series in Cleveland tonight as it shifts back over to the AL team's home stadium. Cleveland Indians look to close this World Series out. It's a battle of two aces, I wouldn't say the ace for either team, but two guys that would be definitely very much in consideration for the ace spot on a lot of other teams. And that is Jake Arrieta facing off against Josh Tomlin. Currently, as it stands, Arrieta is 1-0 in the World Series with a 3.78 ERA. Tomlin, on the other hand, he did not get a decision, and he is pitching with a 1.76 ERA as it stands. This is going to be a big game. Obviously, that's a silly thing to say, but this is going to be a big game. You have Kyle Schwarber back in the lineup as a designated hitter tonight. There'll be a big boost to the Cubs offensively. Arrieta's last time out, he notched a 5-1 win, and that was on Game 2. He had a no-hitter going into the 6th, and he actually had 6 strikeouts in 5 2/3 innings and only 98 pitches right there. So it was pretty good day there for him. Counter there for the Indians. Tomlin pitched in Game 3. Excuse me, he held the Cubs to 0 runs over 5 2/3 innings in a 1-0 win in Game 3, but he did not get the decision there. He's starting with 3 days of rest for the second time only in his MLB career, even though he only threw 58 pitches in Game 3. Of course, it's going to take a little bit. I think mindset, too, you have to kind of look at in that sense. So the problem for the Indians was their bullpen in Game 5. That's going to be an issue that is going to be probably widely talked about in Game 6 here. I think that's a big thing to get to them early. We saw a few different times that the Indians were the first ones to score in this one, and there's going to be some interesting aspects to see what exactly happens in this one in my eyes. We have seen very, very close games regardless of the outcome. We've seen 1-0 wins already. We've seen the very first game was 6-0. The Cleveland just handled that one. We saw the Cubs win 5-1 in back-to-back, and then we had a 1-0 game there, and that was close. The Cleveland win in Game 4 was close until it kind of jumped out 7-2 there. And then, of course, the Cubs won 3-2. So I'm interested to see what the lineups come out like today. I want to see who exactly is getting thrown out there. I think it's a big thing for Schwarber, definitely, to be in the lineup. I think it's definitely a big boost to an offense that, again, struggles at times. I think having him in the DH spot, he wasn't cleared to play in the field at all, from his injury, and I'm not even sure how much he pinch hit in the games in Wrigley. I don't know how many positions he really was in that pinch hit, really. They had 3 straight games there, and they lost 2 straight, so I'm sure he might have gotten an attempt in Friday's game, 1-0, but excuse me. I'm really interested to see how this one goes. I want to say the Cubs can fight off elimination and make this Game 7. Excuse me. And I want to say that they get there. I think from what I've seen, Arrieta has just been lights out for the Cubs. I want to say that they get one more win. And then, all bets are off if a game is to happen tomorrow. In my opinion, I think all bets are off. If tomorrow, there was a game tomorrow, I believe the pitcher would be Kluber again, and then I don't know who it would be if they make it. I believe Hendricks, yeah. So it'd be Kluber-Hendricks if they get to that point tomorrow. Tonight, the game, of course, is at 5. Here, that is Pacific Standard Time. So you're looking at an 8 o'clock start over there on the East Coast. And then anywhere else you guys can, I'm sure you can figure it out. Chicago, I believe that's a 7 o'clock start. I'm definitely looking forward to this one, though. I want to say Cubs win it. I want to say it's going to be close again. And I just think Arrieta is going to come out on top of this one again. I don't know if he's going to come anywhere near close to what he did in his last start in Game 2. Is it 3? I forget. I just said it a minute ago. But, who's to say that that's even really doable? That was a very good start on his end. But I do think that they're going to get a good, solid start from him. I think when you're in this win or go home scenario, you press a little bit differently. And as professionals, I don't think they press at a, dangerous rate. I think they do it smart. And they just know that, there's no reason to not hold anything back. Put it all out there in a smart way, in a productive way, that's going to help the team win. But there's no time to there's always tomorrow, because there's not always going to be a tomorrow, and that starts today. So, of course, Ben, Anthony, and I will all be here tomorrow to discuss the outcome of this game, whether or not the Indians were able to win this one, or if the Cubs were able to fight off and live to see tomorrow and a Game 7 between Hendricks and Kluber. I know the baseball world that aren't fans of either of these teams, like me, would love to see a Game 7. That is the ultimate in sports, one would say, when you have elimination series in that said sport. So I know I would love to see it. But until then, we'll have to, for those who want it, keep fingers crossed for Cubs fans. They're holding their fingers tighter than ever. This is another chance for them to, quote-unquote, blow it and push off and keep pushing off this win that so many want and so many think they deserve. And then the Indians, of course, tonight would, if they do clinch, would win their first World Series in about 70-plus years. So a lot of history in this one, and a lot of history and huge fan bases on the line for this one. All right, we're going to take our last break. We're going to come back, and I have a couple of player, new newses. That's the thing to say. I have a couple of players in different sports, one who might be retiring officially, and one who was just traded as well. So we're going to take our last break. We're going to come back, and we're going to talk to those guys in just a minute here at the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
And we're back here at the Golden State Media Concept Sports Podcast, and we're going to talk some NFL news first, and that is Jamie Collins, linebacker, defensive kind of wonderkin of the Patriots, was traded yesterday in a week that is the trade deadline. The first domino to fall in that aspect. He was traded to the Cleveland Browns for a 2017 third-round pick, a pick that more than likely will turn into a third-round pick because of the fact the Patriots traded Chandler Jones to Arizona last year. That's going to turn into a conditional third-round pick that will go to the Browns in return for that. It was said that Jamie Collins was going off script, especially in their last game this weekend against the Bills, or maybe the Browns the prior week, a few weeks ago, that it came out that he was going off script. And it just is another thing that the Patriots they seem to trade guys before they hit their wall, or trade guys that aren't buying into the whole do your job persona that Bill Belichick has always preached. Now, for those who don't know the exact number, because I definitely didn't until I read this, Bill Belichick has, since with the Patriots, has made 121 trades. Some notable ones, to see what really turned out good for him, as you look at this deal, when they traded Deion Branch to Seattle for a first-round pick, that didn't really do bad or well for them, They didn't really make much of that year overall. Then you have them picking up Wes Welker from the Dolphins for a second and seventh-round pick, each respectively. That obviously turned out pretty good for them. They got Randy Moss from the Raiders for a fourth-round pick. Obviously, that went great for them. They traded Matt Castle and Mike Vrabel to the Kansas City Chiefs back in 2009 after that season in which Castle started for them. And they got Patrick Chung in return. He was with the team and then left the team and came back, and he has been a pretty solid defensive piece for the Patriots. Trading Richard Seymour to the Raiders for their 2011 first-round pick, which turned into Nate Solder. Solder, they haven't played worse than 12-4 since he came to the team. They won a Super Bowl in 2014 with them. He's a starter since 2012. Pretty decent right there for you. Sending Logan Mankins, former starting guard, to Tampa Bay for a fourth-round pick, and their former tight end, Tim Wright. That didn't really do much for them. They did win the World Series. I'm sorry, the World Series. I was talking about that last break. They did win the Super Bowl that year still, but I don't think that was necessarily a huge piece there for them. And then last year they traded, or at least the beginning of this year, March, they traded Chandler Jones to Arizona for second-round draft pick Jonathan Cooper. Now, they did release Jonathan Cooper. They used the salary cap once they released him to pick up some established defensive veterans like Chris Long. And then, like we said yesterday, trading Jamie Collins to Cleveland in exchange for a compensatory third-round pick, which will go to the Browns. Which would go to the Patriots. If you don't buy in, if you don't do things the Patriot way, it has not been a secret that you will be gone. As good as people viewed Jamie Collins, he was not susceptible to trade by any means. And we saw it happen yesterday. And this is the first of possibly, and hopefully, because I love the trade deadline, many trades to happen this week. Now, last but not least, let's move to the NBA. And as it sits right now, Ray Allen has officially retired from the NBA. As he writes, he is completely at peace with himself. He's currently 41. He has not played since the 2013-14 season, which he was with the Heat. He has been, of course, linked a couple of times to a couple different teams, the Warriors and Cavaliers respectively, but he retires after 18 years in the NBA, as he established himself as one of the best shooters ever. Arguably ever. He was a 10-time All-Star in his career. He spent time with 4 teams, the Heat, of course, the Celtics, Supersonics, and the Bucks. Won 2 NBA championships, one with the Celtics and one with the Heat, 2008 and 2013 respectively, and he is the league's all-time leader with 2,973 career three-pointers made. That is more than 413 more than anybody else. 413 more than anyone else to date. That's pretty good. That's Hall of Fame numbers. Obviously, that is very impressive. I mean, 413 more than anybody else as your record. I mean, he had the record. He didn't even have to continue playing if he felt he was kind of far on and it was time to end it. He didn't have to continue getting in. He just bumped and kept padding that record. It's impressive, to say the least. Through his career, he averaged 18.9 points a game, played 1,300 regular season contests, and shot 89.4% from the free throw line. That is the 7th best percentage in NBA history. I didn't say he was a good, one of the best shooters in the NBA for a reason. I didn't say it for nothing. He's pretty good. And he is the last of the big 3 members to announce their retirement this year, as a matter of fact. Kevin Garnett, 40. He retired on September 23rd after his 21-year NBA career, and then Paul Pierce, who was 39, announced his retirement 3 days later. So the last of the first big 3, the Celtics big 3, that brought them glory back in 2008, at the age of 41, has officially retired. I'm going to miss watching him play. I really am. I thought Ray Allen was one of the really more fun guys to watch. He was always, you like the long ball, you liked seeing threes, and he definitely was one that just made that happen over and over and over again. So I'm going to miss seeing him play. He was definitely a fun guy to watch. He was always went about it the right way. He was always professional. He was never really a guy to get in the face with anybody, And don't forget, before we get going, he also won a gold medal as a member of the 2000 United States men's basketball team. And he has acted in 2 films, one of which he was in the lead role in 1988's He Got Game by Spike Lee. Don't you forget about that. Sad to see you go, Ray Allen. Thank you for all the memories. Thank you for all of the three-pointers. And you will be very much remembered as one of the all-time great shooters and one of the best NBA players of all time, in my opinion. As always, we will be back tomorrow to discuss, I'm sure, Game 6 of the World Series, despite what the outcome might be. Either way, we will be here discussing that. And I do believe we will be discussing, the first college football playoff rankings that are supposed to come out later today. Among other things, those are the things we will talk about. I cannot wait to share them with you. I will be back tomorrow with my 2 co-hosts. As always, for them, for Ben, for Anthony, I am Alex. We'd like to thank you so much for listening to the Golden State Media Concept Sports Podcast, and we will see you on the next episode. Enjoy your sports tonight, and we will see you then. You guys have a good rest of your day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.